My granddaughter had just turned 7 when the surgical trauma team rushed her through the double doors of the emergency wing. At that exact, agonizing second, her own mother was anchored off the pristine coast of the Bahamas, lounging on the deck of a yacht, sipping my vintage champagne with her golf instructor. I am 69 years old. I have outlived a beloved wife, 3 ruthless business partners, and my younger brother. I have stood over too many graves, and I truly believed the darkest, most hollow days of my life were firmly in the rearview mirror. I was dead wrong. Over the course of the next 72 hours, I stripped that woman of every single thing she owned. I took everything she assumed was hers. I dismantled her reality brick by brick, and I made sure she had a front row seat to her own absolute destruction, from the filthy floor of a concrete holding cell in a foreign country. My name is Arthur Vance. I built a private freight and logistics empire, starting with a single drafty rat-infested warehouse in South Boston back in 1981. I didn't inherit my wealth. I dragged it out of the freezing New England winters, driving the delivery trucks myself when men didn't show up for their shifts. You learn a lot about human nature when you spend 4 decades negotiating with dock workers, union bosses, and corporate sharks. You learn to spot a liar by how they hold a pen. 4 decades later, that one freezing warehouse is an operation spanning 300 facilities across 11 states. Before I break down exactly how I surgically dismantled my daughter-in-law in under 3 days, do me a favor. Like this video, subscribe to the Heart Haven Stories, and let me know in the comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far a grandfather's justice can reach. The phone rang at 4:22 p.m. on a Thursday. I know the exact time because I was wrapping up a grueling quarterly review with my CFO, glancing at my watch, figuring out if I could grab a black coffee before my 5 o'clock call. I will never forget the face of that watch. I took it off that night, and it has been locked inside a desk drawer ever since. It was my son, David. He's 35, and he runs my Mountain West division out of Denver. He is a rock, a grounded, steady, deeply analytical man who absolutely never panics. He is the anchor of our family. But when he spoke, his voice was entirely unrecognizable. It sounded like it was coming from the bottom of a well. "Dad," he choked out, his breath catching. "It's Lily. She fell." He told me she had tumbled over the second-story balcony at their house. She was completely unresponsive. The paramedics were working on her in the driveway, loading her into the ambulance to rush her to Rocky Mountain Hospital for Children. The mahogany floor of my office seemed to drop out from beneath me. I slumped hard against the heavy oak of my desk, knocking over a stack of files. My CFO froze, the color draining from his face as he watched mine. "Where are you?" I demanded, the adrenaline suddenly flooding my system. "Where is her mother?" The silence on the line was deafening. It's the silence I remember most vividly from this whole ordeal, the heavy, suffocating sound of a son who knows something is profoundly wrong, but doesn't have the breath or the heart to explain it out loud. "She isn't here," David finally whispered, the words trembling. "She's in the Bahamas. She flew out on Monday." Monday was 3 days ago. David had been in Salt Lake City since Monday morning, running a massive regional audit I had specifically assigned to him. That meant my granddaughter, my sweet Lily, a little girl with a gap-toothed smile, and her late grandmother's loud, infectious laugh, had been alone in that massive, empty house. "Who was watching her?" I demanded, my voice turning into a growl. "The nanny," he said. "Maria. She's been with us for years. Dad, they're loading her into the ambulance. I have to go." "I am on my way," I told him, already moving toward the door. "Wheels up in an hour." I was in the air out of Hanscom Field in exactly 45 minutes. That isn't a boast about having private wealth. It's a testament to the terrifying speed of what a father's love can mobilize. I bought a private jet because I spent the late 90s missing my son's baseball games while stuck in delayed airport terminals. And I swore I'd never let logistics keep me from my family again. That afternoon, listening to the dull roar of the jet engines, it flew me toward the most agonizing night of my entire existence. I tried calling David twice during the flight. The calls went straight to voicemail. Eventually, my phone buzzed with a text message from him. In surgery, 4HR's men don't call. My son never uses abbreviations. He never skips punctuation. He was sitting in a sterile, brightly lit hospital corridor, staring at the floor, waiting to see if his only child would survive a catastrophic head injury. And he couldn't even force his fingers to type a full sentence. I immediately called his wife, 3 times. You need to understand exactly who Victoria is. Keep her name in your mind. Let it marinate. Because by the time I'm finished, it will leave a bitter metallic taste in your mouth. David married her 8 years ago at a sprawling coastal estate in Newport, Rhode Island. The wedding cost me $90,000. I bought her designer Vera Wang gown. I paid for the 5-star catering. During the reception, with a glass of champagne in her hand, she gave a tearful toast claiming she had never felt safer than she did wrapped in the arms of the Vance family. Not happier, not loved, safer, like a calculating woman, successfully boarding a heavily fortified life raft. He had met Victoria a year before the wedding, at a high-end charity auction I had sponsored. She played him perfectly, mapping out his generous nature with the precision of a predator. She claimed she had lost her parents young and wanted nothing more than to build a permanent, deeply loving family with him. I should have trusted my gut. I have spent a lifetime dealing with opportunists, con artists, and corporate mercenaries. I recognize a hustler when I look into their eyes. I could see that she didn't have a maternal bone in her body. She had a calculator for a heart. But my son loved her, and soon she was the mother of my only granddaughter. I desperately wanted to believe the illusion of their happy family, so I forced myself to look the other way. Victoria's phone went straight to her custom voicemail. Hi, it's Victoria. Leave a message at the tone and live your best life. Live your best life. My 7-year-old granddaughter's skull was cracked open on a steel operating table, and her mother's chipper recording was telling me to live my best life. I called Marcus Thorne, my head of corporate security. Marcus spent 2 decades as a federal agent hunting down international fugitives before I poached him for double his government salary. He is a ghost in the machine. I told him what happened. I told him Victoria was supposedly on a girls' trip in the Bahamas. I told him I needed her exact coordinates before my plane's landing gear touched down in Colorado. I didn't ask him as a favor. I commanded it as his employer. 20 minutes later the satellite phone on my jet rang. It was Marcus. She is on a luxury charter docked at the Atlantis Marina in Nassau, he reported, his voice devoid of any emotion. The vessel is called Ocean Whisper. It's a 120-foot yacht. She boarded Monday evening, and Arthur, she isn't alone. Who is with her? I asked, gripping the armrest. A guy named Julian Hayes, 32 years old. He's listed as the head golf pro at their country club in Denver. According to the club ledgers, they've been booking private sessions for 2 years. My jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth would shatter. Are you absolutely certain about this, Marcus? I have the credit card receipts from the marina, the flight manifest from Miami to Nassau, and a high-res security still of them walking up the gangway together, Marcus said. He's carrying her bags, and he's wearing your son's engraved Rolex. I didn't feel angry. Anger is a volatile, sloppy, and fundamentally useless emotion. What I felt was absolute, chilling clarity. The kind of icy, hyper-focused stillness you get right before you pull a trigger you can never unpull. Marcus, I said, my voice dropping an octave. Put physical eyes on that yacht immediately. I want to know when she takes a breath. Pull every record you can legally access, and a few you can't. Bank accounts, phone logs, text records. Find everything. Next, I dialed my personal lawyer. Evelyn Carmichael. She's a 72-year-old legal apex predator who could dismantle a Fortune 500 corporate law firm in her sleep. She is ruthless, brilliant, and entirely devoid of mercy. I gave her the details. "How fast do you want this entire structure brought down?" Evelyn asked, already typing on her end. "Before the sun comes up," I replied. She let out a dry, humorless laugh that sounded like sandpaper. "Arthur, you ruthless old bastard. Give me until Friday." We touched down in Denver just before 11 p.m. I bypassed the hotel and had my driver take me straight to the pediatric ICU. David was slumped in a hard plastic waiting room chair. His clothes were heavily stained with dried blood, and I didn't dare ask whose it was. He stood up when he saw me, his eyes bloodshot and sunken, and we just held each other. My 35-year-old boy, the executive who manages thousands of employees, buried his face in my shoulder and sobbed until his lungs gave out. At midnight, the lead neurosurgeon came through the swinging doors. Severe depressed skull fracture, subdural hematoma, a shattered clavicle. They had successfully relieved the pressure on her brain, but they had placed Lily in a medically induced coma to completely stop the swelling. The prognosis was guarded, but stable. I put on the sterile gown and walked into the ICU room. Lily looked entirely too small for the massive hospital bed. Part of her beautiful brown hair had been shaved away, her head wrapped in thick, sterile gauze. A ventilator tube was taped to her pale face, breathing for her. Around her frail wrist was a delicate silver chain with a tiny butterfly pendant I had bought her for her birthday. I pulled up a chair. I sat down. I took her small, bruised hand in my giant, calloused one, and I made a quiet, unbreakable vow to the humming machines in that room. "The woman who did this to you," I promised her, "is going to lose everything she has ever valued. She is going to be erased, and I am going to make her watch it happen." I stepped out into the hallway to coordinate with David. We learned that the beloved nanny, Maria, had been abruptly sent away on Monday morning. Victoria had cheerfully told her she had the entire week off because David's mother was flying in from the East Coast to babysit. David's mother has been dead for a decade. She is buried under a weeping willow in Massachusetts. This meant my 7-year-old granddaughter had been left entirely unsupervised, abandoned in a 6-bedroom house from Monday morning until Thursday afternoon. She had survived by foraging for pantry snacks, dry cereal, and juice boxes. She had been playing by herself on the second-floor balcony, leaned her slight weight against the wooden railing to look at the street below, and the wood simply gave way. David had been complaining about that faulty, rotting railing all spring. Victoria had sworn up and down she had hired a professional contractor to fix it in April. David even remembered seeing a white work truck parked in the driveway one afternoon. I called Marcus. "Find out exactly who was at that property in April. Hack the contractor registries if you have to. Get me the work order. I want to know if a licensed professional actually touched that balcony." At 2 a.m., standing outside the hospital in the freezing Denver night air, I called Evelyn. "I want you to file for a catastrophic divorce on David's behalf. The exact second the courthouse doors open," I instructed. "Cite adultery and gross child abandonment. Freeze all joint accounts. Strip her name from the house deed using the contingency clauses. Repossess her leased luxury SUV. Cancel every single credit card, and alert the local police." "On what grounds for the police?" and she asked. "Child endangerment for starters," I said. "But there's a railing in that house that might have been deliberately ignored. We need the authorities on the property to get it on the official record." Evelyn paused, the line going silent for a beat. "Arthur, listen to me carefully. If that balcony was tampered with, let the cops discover it first. Do not tip your hand. If you accuse her now, she lawyers up and hides the evidence." She was completely right. I went back upstairs and grabbed a yellow legal notepad, sat in the corner of Lily's room, and began drafting a meticulous 9-step blueprint for total human ruin. At 7 a.m., Marcus called my cell. "The contractor from April wasn't a contractor," he said flatly. It was the Golf Pro, Julian. The white truck your son saw was a day rental from the Aurora Home Depot. No permits exist in the city database. No legitimate repairs were ever made. Get a forensic structural engineer to the property immediately, I ordered. I found David sitting by Lily's bed holding her foot. I sat him down in the hallway and told him everything. The yacht, the Bahamas, the Golf Pro, the fake contractor, the elaborate lie that left his daughter alone to die. I watched the last remaining light entirely leave his eyes, replaced by a hollow, terrifying darkness. What do you want to do? I asked him quietly. I will follow your lead. He stared through the glass at his little girl. I want her to have absolutely nothing left in this world before the police put the handcuffs on her. I want her to feel it. Done, I said. Here is exactly what happens when infinite financial resources meet infinite, unyielding patience. 10 a.m. Evelyn filed the divorce papers, sealing them with an emergency judge. 11:30 a.m. The catastrophic asset freeze hit the banking mainframes. 12 p.m. A licensed forensic engineer was inspecting the Denver balcony, taking microscopic photos of the splintered wood. 2 p.m. Victoria's joint checking and savings accounts were permanently locked. 3 p.m. Her luxury SUV was intercepted and towed out of the Denver International Airport long-term parking garage by my logistics crew. 4 p.m. Every single credit card tied to her name was flagged for massive fraud, triggering automatic, unreversible cancellations. 5 p.m. The Denver house was legally transferred out of her reach and into an ironclad, irrevocable trust I had quietly established for Lily 3 years ago. 6 p.m. The Denver district attorney officially opened a criminal investigation. At 7 p.m., the structural engineer's preliminary report arrived in my inbox. The balcony hadn't just broken from rot. 2 primary load-bearing lag bolts had been intentionally extracted and replaced with decorative, non-bearing wood screws that barely penetrated the frame. It wouldn't have collapsed under an adult's weight. An adult would have felt the immediate sway and backed off to safety. It was explicitly, mathematically rigged to collapse under the light, trusting weight of a child. My granddaughter was meant to die. On Friday morning, and completely oblivious to the financial guillotine that had already dropped on her neck, Victoria tried to pay for a round of mimosas in Nassau. Her platinum card was declined. Marcus's man on the ground, sitting 2 tables away, sent me a picture of her looking incredibly annoyed, snapping her fingers at the bartender and handing him a second card. Declined. A third. Declined. She furiously called her bank. Customer service told her the accounts were locked under a federal fraud investigation. And hung up. She called David. No answer. She called me. No answer. By Friday afternoon, the yacht management company captain approached her, demanding she clear her massive tab for the premium liquor and the onboard massages before they pulled out of the marina. She had exactly $14 to her name in an isolated checking account. By Friday night, Julian the Golf Pro realized the endless fountain of money was suddenly gone, and the walls were rapidly closing in. He panicked. Saturday morning, Julian abandoned her while she was in the shower. He booked a one-way commercial flight to Dallas. He left a hastily scribbled note on the mahogany nightstand that simply read, "I'm out. Don't contact me." Saturday morning, Victoria called David 24 times, leaving hysterical, screaming voicemails demanding to know why her cards were shut off. She called the nanny, who had been briefed by my team, and immediately blocked her number. She called her sister in Seattle. Her sister's phone had been disconnected thanks to a very aggressive, financially ruinous cease and desist letter from Evelyn. By Saturday afternoon, the Bahamian local authorities escorted Victoria off the luxury yacht for theft of services. The charter company legally impounded her Louis Vuitton luggage to cover the unpaid debts. She was left standing on a wooden dock in the blazing sun with her passport, a dead cell phone, and a sheer swimsuit cover-up. She spent Saturday night sleeping curled up on a hard plastic chair in the Nassau airport terminal, surrounded by strangers. By Monday morning, The Denver DA issued a high-priority warrant: aggravated child endangerment and attempted murder in the first degree. Marcus's elite team had successfully pulled the deleted security footage from the Aurora Home Depot's servers. Julian didn't buy the tools. Victoria did. She bought the high-torque power drill and the decorative screws on her own personal credit card. She had unscrewed the life-saving bolts on her own daughter's balcony with her own 2 hands. Monday afternoon. The doctors began weaning Lily off the sedatives. She fluttered her eyes open, looked through the haze at David sitting beside her, and whispered her first word in 5 days. Daddy. Monday evening, the international extradition warrant hit the Bahamian government desks. Victoria was picked up by local police while trying to beg a janitor to use his phone at the airport. On Tuesday morning, I flew my jet to Nassau. I didn't send a lawyer. I went myself, because I needed her to look deep into my eyes and know exactly who had burned her entire life to the ground. They were holding her in a miserable, humid, windowless cell at the Central Police Station. The heat inside was oppressive, smelling of stale sweat, rust, and raw fear. She was barefoot, severely sunburned, shivering, and completely broken. When I walked up to the iron bars, she threw herself against them, her hands grasping the metal. "Arthur, please," she sobbed, tears cutting through the dirt on her face. "It's a huge mistake. I would never, ever hurt Lily. Please, you have to help me." "I have the Home Depot security footage," I said, my voice dead calm, barely above a whisper. "I have the time-stamped receipt for the power drill and the screws." Her face completely froze. The mask she had worn for 8 years completely shattered into a million pieces. "Julian made me do it," she desperately, pathetically lied. "He said if I didn't get rid of her, he'd tell David about the affair, and David would leave me with nothing on the street." "Julian is safely back in Dallas," I replied smoothly. "He took a generous plea deal yesterday afternoon. He is testifying against you in open court." She collapsed onto the filthy concrete floor, curling into a ball. "You took everything from me," she wailed into the dark. "I took absolutely nothing," I told her, crouching down so my eyes were level with hers through the bars. "You did this all by yourself. I just made sure there was nowhere left for you to hide." I looked at her with pure, unadulterated disgust. "You wanted your own daughter dead, because you thought David was the sole heir to a massive trust fund, and you wanted to walk away with half in the inevitable divorce without the burden of a child. But you didn't do your homework, Victoria. That trust wasn't in David's name. It was in Lily's name. If she died, every single cent would have immediately reverted to Boston Children's Hospital. You wouldn't have seen a dime. You ruined your life, and you almost killed your own flesh and blood, for absolutely nothing. You're not just a monster. You're a fundamentally terrible investor." I stood up, adjusting my cuffs. "I'm going back to Denver now. My granddaughter is awake. I'm going to spend the rest of my natural life making sure she never, ever hears your name again." I walked out into the Caribbean sun and didn't look back once. Victoria was successfully extradited back to Colorado a week later. With the overwhelming physical evidence, the financial paper trail, and Julian enthusiastically testifying against her to save his own skin, she is looking at 30 years to life in a federal penitentiary. Julian got 5 years in a minimum security facility. Lily is finally home. She is recovering beautifully, surrounded by people who would die to protect her. She doesn't remember the terrible fall, only the confusion of waking up in the hospital. David sat her down and told her that her mother was gone forever, that she was safe, and he meant every single word. We tore the entire cursed balcony off the side of the house and permanently sealed the wall with brick. We completely remodeled and moved Lily's bedroom to the ground floor, where she has a window seat looking out over a beautiful garden. David is in intensive therapy, doing the excruciating work of learning how to survive the darkest betrayal a father could ever witness. I am sharing this deeply personal, horrific story because you need to understand something vital about the dark side of human nature. There are people who enter your life during a season of intense grief, vulnerability, or loneliness. and they immediately start looking for the blind spots in your armor. They map the floor plan while you're offering them dinner. Watch what people do when they think the cameras are off and no one important is in the room. Pay close attention to the tiny, insignificant lies. The small lies are always the blueprints for the massive, life-destroying deceptions. Look at the bank statements. Double-check the alibis. Look at the railing. And if someone ever targets your family, if they ever come for the blood of the people you love, do not yell. Do not threaten them. Do not give them the gift of knowing you are coming for them. Build your flawless trap in the pitch dark. Lock all the doors. And let them realize their fatal mistake. Only when it's already entirely too late to run. Drop a comment below right now. What city are you watching from? And exactly how would you have handled Victoria if it were your family on the line? Stay vigilant. Protect your own at all costs. And never, ever ignore the railing.